What you're about to hear isn't just a story about family and fortune, it's about the night a quiet celebration at the Fairmont San Francisco turned into a silent war for survival. Stay until the end, because the person who lifted her glass that evening never imagined she was drinking her own fate. After selling my investment firm for $35 million, I wanted to celebrate quietly. No journalists, no reporters, no headlines, just a private dinner with the few people who still called me family. The Fairmont's Venetian room seemed perfect: gold chandeliers, a string quartet, and a view of the Bay Bridge glowing through the tall, arched windows. I told the concierge, make it elegant but discreet. That Friday night the ballroom smelled of roses and expensive perfume. My son Michael stood near the bar, his tie slightly crooked, trying to look confident. Camille, his wife, floated through the guests like a practiced actress, smiling just long enough to hide her boredom. Her mother, Evelyn Davenport, arrived last, wearing a sequined shawl that caught the light like a lure meant for richer prey. And beside the grand piano sat my oldest friend, Harold Benton, my lawyer for more than 20 years, the only man in that room who still knew who I truly was. The dinner unfolded with polite laughter and meaningless conversation. The quartet played Vivaldi, and every note echoed against my glass. I had built a life of numbers, contracts, and discipline, but that evening something felt off. Perhaps it was Camille's glances toward my glass of champagne, fleeting but deliberate, or the way she whispered to her mother, shielding her lips behind the flute's rim. When the waiter approached with the final toast, I noticed Camille's hand tremble slightly as she reached across the table. Her manicure glinted under the chandelier. A single drop of clear liquid slipped from her ring finger into my drink. No one saw it except me. I didn't flinch. In business, panic is what kills you. I simply smiled, reached for the glass, and said, "To endings that give birth to beginnings." Then, as everyone lifted their glasses, I exchanged mine with Evelyn's. A gesture so small it vanished within the golden blur of applause and crystal. The first sip burned differently from the rest. Evelyn's laughter broke the room's rhythm. Her lipstick left a faint coral ring on the glass. Then came the coughing, soft at first, then violent, uncontrolled. The music stopped. The chandelier above her seemed to flicker. In less than a minute, she collapsed against the tablecloth, eyes wide, breath gone. Camille screamed, dropping her glass, the sound shattering like ice on marble. Michael leapt from his chair, shouting for help. Harold dialed emergency services with the calm precision of a man used to signing wills, not saving lives. And I just sat there watching the panic ripple through the perfect surface of our family. The medics came fast, too fast maybe. They took Evelyn away under a white sheet, her sequins still glinting beneath the fluorescent light. The police questioned everyone, and the cameras outside flashed like vultures circling a corpse of reputation. But no one suspected me. Why would they? I was the grieving patriarch, the man who'd lost a friend of the family. And Camille. Oh, poor Camille, she couldn't stop trembling. Her mascara ran black rivers down her cheeks as she clung to Michael's arm, whispering she didn't deserve this. 3 days later, the toxicology report confirmed what I already knew: cyanide hidden inside the sugared rim of the glass. The detectives called it an unfortunate mistake. They believed the poison had been meant for me, a business rival's revenge, perhaps. But I didn't correct them. Truth is, a luxury only fools insist on paying for. Camille never recovered from the guilt. She withdrew from society, sold her jewelry, moved into silence. Michael tried to rebuild what was left of their marriage, but every time he looked at her, he saw his mother-in-law dying all over again. By the time autumn arrived, they were gone from San Francisco, leaving behind nothing but a house full of mirrors. I still go to the Fairmont once a year. I sit at the same table, order the same champagne, and tip the waiter too much. Harold joins me sometimes. He never asks questions. He knows that revenge, like fine wine, should be tasted slowly, never gulped. People often think justice comes from courts or conscience. They're wrong. Justice lives in the moments you choose silence over confession, control over chaos. It lives in the flick of a wrist, in the subtle exchange of two identical glasses. When I look back on that night, I don't feel proud, but I do feel balanced. Evelyn's death wasn't my doing, it was the universe's symmetry correcting itself. Camille had planned to erase me from her inheritance, to turn my retirement into her empire. Instead, she inherited an emptiness that no amount of money can fill. Sometimes I still hear the echo of her scream when I close my eyes. Sometimes I wonder if I should have forgiven her, if that would have been the higher road. But forgiveness, I've learned, is just another form of weakness people disguise as virtue. If you've listened this far, you already know what I'm about to say. Every family hides a war, every smile covers a wound. And sometimes the only way to survive is to let fate drink first. So tell me, what would you have done if you were sitting in my chair that night at the Fairmont? Would you have stopped her? Or would you have let the glass change hands? If you reach the end of this story, comment the word champagne below so I know you stayed with me till the final toast. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe, because the next story might make you question every celebration you've ever attended. What you're about to hear isn't a story about wealth. It's about the silence that money can't buy, the kind that fills a room and makes you wonder what's hiding underneath the laughter. Stay until the end, because before the champagne ever touched my lips that night at the Fairmont, something or someone had already warned me. The Fairmont San Francisco has that kind of elegance that pretends it's eternal. Marble floors waxed to perfection, gold trim that catches the light just enough to flatter age, not reveal it. The concierge greeted me by name. The doorman remembered the model of my car. When you've spent 40 years building empires and erasing enemies, you learn that politeness often hides fear. I was comfortable with both. It was the Friday I had chosen to retire. 67 years old, silver hair, heart still intact, at least as far as cardiologists and lawyers were concerned. Selling the Calloway fund for $35 million was supposed to feel like triumph. Instead, it felt like finishing a novel I hadn't written myself. Harold Benton. My lawyer insisted on hosting a private dinner to mark the end of an era. He said it would be intimate, just family and a few close associates. I agreed, mostly because it would make my son Michael happy. Michael had that gentle guilt children develop when they realize their father's shadow is longer than they'll ever grow. His wife Camille, on the other hand, thrived in the light of other people's wealth. Beautiful, educated, ruthless in her charm, she'd learned early that people don't stab you. They toast to you first. Her mother Evelyn was cut from the same fabric, woven with ambition and perfume. I checked into my suite early that morning. Room 804, corner view of the bay, the Golden Gate Bridge, caught in a fog that refused to lift. San Francisco light is deceptive, it flatters decay. The same could be said of our family. For hours I sat at the writing desk by the window, rehearsing gratitude. The speech I'd give that evening was short, full of polite nostalgia, names of people I respected, anecdotes that sounded warm even when they weren't. I poured a single glass of bourbon, told myself it would be my last drink before the toast. But the real story began not with a toast, but with a knock. A soft one. 3 taps. When I opened the door, no one was there, only a folded note on the carpet, the paper thick and expensive, the kind used for wedding invitations. 2 words were written in blue ink: "Don't drink tonight." No signature, no explanation, no room service tray to blame it on. I stared at the handwriting. It was unfamiliar, precise, maybe a woman's, maybe someone trying too hard to hide that it was. My first thought was Harold playing a joke. Then I noticed the faint scent of perfume, something floral, modern, not his brand of humor. I folded the note, slipped it into my inside pocket, and laughed to myself. After 40 years in finance, paranoia is just another asset. Still the words lingered. Don't drink tonight, like an echo that refused to fade. I spent the afternoon pretending I'd forgotten it. Lunch with Harold at the Laurel Court restaurant. A short walk through Nob Hill. A visit to the tailor who had altered my tuxedo for the last time. Yet every reflection in shop windows and polished elevator doors seemed to ask the same question: who sent the warning? By 5 o'clock, the sun dipped low enough to turn the bay the color of champagne. I took it as a sign of irony. My room smelled faintly of the lilies the hotel staff had arranged, Camille's favorite. She had a way of choosing flowers that looked pure and died quickly. At 6, the phone rang. Michael's voice sounded cheerful, forced. "Dad, we're downstairs. Camille's mother can't stop talking about the chandelier in the ballroom. You're gonna love it." I almost told him about the note. Almost. But something in his tone that rehearsed happiness told me not to. Secrets, after all, are what keep families from falling apart too soon. I pressed the note flat on the desk and studied it one more time. No letterhead, just ink paper and intent. The handwriting looped at the end of tonight, a curl that looked feminine. For a fleeting moment I thought of Evelyn Davenport. She had once written me a thank you card after their engagement, same kind of flourish, same attempt at elegance. But she wouldn't warn me, would she? The elevator ride to the ballroom felt longer than it should have. When the doors opened, the sound of a string quartet spilled out, soft, expensive, designed to soothe. Harold Benton waved me over, already holding a drink. "You look 10 years younger, Richard," he said. "That's because I finally stopped pretending to care," I answered. Camille arrived a few minutes later, glowing under the chandelier's gold. Her smile was perfect, but her eyes darted toward my glass before I even picked it up. That detail wouldn't strike me until later, after everything had already happened. Evelyn swept in behind her daughter like a royal escort, all sequins and certainty. She kissed my cheek, left a faint coral print I didn't bother to wipe away. I told Camille, she whispered, "This city brings out the best in men your age." It sounded like a compliment, but the undertone was possession. Dinner unfolded in layers of laughter, each thinner than the last. The food was perfect, the service flawless, but conversation moved like slow poison, charming, polite, and fatal if swallowed whole. Harold talked investments. Evelyn talked art. Camille talked about nothing at all, and through it I felt that same vibration of unease humming beneath the silverware. Halfway through the main course, the waiter leaned close. "Mr. Calloway, your favorite brand of champagne has just been delivered. Compliments of Mrs. Calloway." Camille's smile widened. "Just a little surprise, Richard. You deserve something special." The note in my pocket felt heavier. "Don't drink tonight." I nodded politely, raising my glass when everyone else did, but my hand trembled barely, almost imperceptibly. If anyone noticed, they mistook it for age. The first sip never came, at least not yet. I watched the bubbles rise, golden and endless, a tiny universe in a flute. Around me, laughter, silver music, the architecture of deception. Harold leaned in. "You okay, Richard?" "Perfect," I said. But inside I was tracing every possible scenario: who sent the note, who touched my glass, who would benefit if I didn't live to enjoy my retirement. At 70, suspicion isn't cynicism. It's experience with better lighting. Later that night, the night you already know, the one where the toast was made, and a single act of quiet revenge rewrote everything, I would finally understand what that note meant. But back then, sitting under the chandelier pretending to smile, I was still the man who believed in coincidence. The band began to play the opening of Autumn Leaves. Evelyn laughed too loudly at something Harold said. Camille reached across the table, her bracelet catching the light, the same light that reflected in my glass. For a moment, time froze in elegance. No violence, no truth, just the shimmer before the storm. If you've been following so far, tell me something simple. Imagine you found that same note, "Don't drink tonight," waiting under your door before the party. Would you trust it, or would you ignore it? Press 0 if you'd trust the warning. Press 1 if you'd take the drink anyway. The orchestra shifted from Autumn Leaves to something livelier, though no one at our table seemed truly alive. Conversation moved like perfume, pleasant, heavy, suffocating. I could feel the room shrinking, the air turning warmer, thicker, as if the chandeliers were lowering inch by inch. Camille laughed at something Evelyn whispered, that sharp crystal laugh meant to announce she belonged here. Michael smiled too, but his eyes betrayed exhaustion. Success had never looked heavier on him. Across the table, Harold Benton cut his steak with quiet precision, every motion deliberate, as if he were preparing evidence rather than dinner. The waiters glided between tables like shadows trained to smile. My champagne glass remained untouched. Inside my jacket pocket, the folded note still pressed against my chest. "Don't drink tonight." The unease from earlier had not faded, it had evolved. What began as curiosity was now a low hum of claustrophobia, the kind that makes even laughter sound like warning bells. I watched the bubbles rise in every glass but mine. Evelyn lifted her flute. "A toast, perhaps," she said, voice honeyed, rehearsed. Before I could respond, Camille stood. "If you don't mind, Richard," she said, "I prepared something first. Just a little surprise." Her tone was innocent, her timing surgical. She nodded to a hotel attendant standing by the piano. The lights dimmed slightly. The string quartet paused mid-note. A projection screen descended behind us with the smooth precision of a curtain call. "Ladies and gentlemen," Camille announced, "I thought we could take a brief look back at the journey that brought us here, a tribute to Richard Calloway, my brilliant father-in-law." Applause, smiles, and then silence. The screen flickered to life. At first it was harmless photos of me shaking hands with governors, ribbon cuttings, the front page of Forbes. The kind of curated nostalgia that flatters the living before the obituary does. But then about 2 minutes in, the footage changed. A clip from a company conference 10 years earlier, me caught off guard, off script. I was yelling at a board member, voice sharp, profanity unmuted. Another cut, headlines from the recession years, accusations of layoffs and lost pensions. Faces of former employees faded onto the screen one after another. Gasps rippled through the room. Camille's smile didn't falter. It blossomed. Evelyn clapped her hands lightly as if proud of her daughter's bold honesty. Michael looked stunned, whispering, "Camille, what the hell?" And me, I sat perfectly still. Because power once threatened doesn't panic, it observes. When the video ended, polite applause stuttered into an awkward hush. The lights came back on. Camille touched my shoulder gently. "It's all part of your story, Richard. People love authentic betrayal stories these days. It makes you human." Her words landed like a blade wrapped in silk. I smiled, the kind of smile that makes photographers nervous. "Indeed," I said softly. "Nothing sells like honesty." Harold's eyes met mine. He shook his head slightly, as if warning me not to react. But the note in my pocket had started to burn. "Don't drink tonight." Now I understood it wasn't a warning about poison. It was about pride. The kind that kills slower. Dinner resumed, though conversation never recovered. The air carried the aftertaste of scandal. People talked in lower voices as if guilt might be contagious. Camille leaned toward her mother, whispering with a smirk. Evelyn sipped her champagne and nodded approvingly. To them, this was victory, public humiliation masked as tribute. To me, it was confirmation. As the main course was cleared, I excused myself. In the mirror of the men's lounge, I studied my reflection, composed, deliberate, ancient. Behind the calm surface, a quiet storm aligned every memory, the deals, the betrayals, the price of silence. I realized I was surrounded by actors who believed they were the directors. When I returned, the dessert plates had arrived. Chocolate soufflé, gold dusted. The waiter leaned close, whispering, "Your champagne, sir?" I nodded this time. Let them think I'd forgiven. Let them think the patriarch had surrendered to sentiment. The flute gleamed under the chandelier as I lifted it, but before anyone else could react, I spoke. "Before we drink," I said, "I'd like to add something." All eyes turned toward me. I stood, glass-raised, posture easy. The screen behind me still glowed faintly with the last frame of that humiliating video. My frozen face, mid-shout, an echo of rage captured forever. Perfect. I've learned, I began, that success isn't measured by money or legacy. It's measured by what remains when your own family decides to test your dignity. Camille stiffened. Michael stared at the tablecloth. Evelyn smiled, misreading my tone as surrender. "In this life," I continued, "we all tell betrayal stories, some with words, some with actions. The difference is whether we tell them to the world or to ourselves." A murmur rippled through the guests. Camille reached for her glass, voice trembling slightly. "Richard, maybe we should know." I interrupted gently. "Let's finish the evening the way it was meant to be." The waiter refilled the flutes, crystal catching light like liquid fire. As I looked down at my glass, the note's message returned sharp and undeniable. "Don't drink tonight." I glanced toward the balcony doors. A gust of wind rattled them enough to extinguish one of the candles near Camille's seat. Superstition whispered through the guests. Evelyn crossed herself discreetly. In that flicker of darkness, I saw what fear truly looked like, refined, perfumed, pretending to be charm. When the light returned, Camille's hand trembled. She tried to hide it by gesturing to the waiter. "Just a toast," she said, her voice thin, "to new beginnings." And that was when I noticed it, the tiniest glint of residue on the rim of my glass, like sugar crystals, but uneven. Too coarse. Too deliberate. I remembered the note. I remembered the video. And for the first time I saw not a family dinner, but a stage built for execution. Evelyn laughed, reaching across the table to steady her daughter's hand. "Camille, darling, you're shaking. You've outdone yourself. He's not angry at all." The string quartet resumed softly, unaware that tragedy was already rehearsing its entrance. I looked at Harold. He raised an eyebrow, silent question, silent loyalty. I gave him the faintest nod. Then I smiled, turned back to the table and said, "You're right, Camille. Tonight is about honesty, about endings." I lifted my glass, waited for the others to mirror me. And as they did, I reached slowly, casually, and switched my flute with Evelyn's. The motion was invisible, hidden within etiquette. The kind of move only experience can perfect. The kind born of decades living among polished knives disguised as family silver. For a heartbeat, the world was still. Then applause forced awkward polite. The quartet struck its final chord. Evelyn took her sip first. Her eyes closed briefly, savoring the sweetness that wasn't sugar. And somewhere deep inside, I understood that the note's author, whoever they were, hadn't been warning me. They'd been testing whether I still deserved to live. The rest of that night, as you already know, belongs to whispers and paramedics. But the real story isn't about death, it's about how quiet revenge can sound when wrapped in manners. People think betrayal stories are about anger. They're not. They're about control, about knowing exactly when to stop pretending. If this story has held you till now, you already know silence can be more dangerous than shouting, tap thee or hit. Like not for me, but for the moment you realized every toast hides a secret. There are moments when time forgets how to move. Not the grand moments people photograph, weddings, births, triumphs, but the ones that hang between breaths so quiet you can hear your own pulse negotiating with your conscience. That's what the ballroom felt like the instant Evelyn Davenport raised the glass that was never meant for her. The light above her shimmered through the champagne like gold dust swirling in holy water. The quartet's final chord lingered mid-air, half-finished. Every face around the table wore the same polite anticipation, that fleeting harmony before applause. And then, nothing. The universe inhaled. Evelyn's smile froze first. A second later, the glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the marble. The sound was so pure, so sharp, it sliced through the music, through the illusion, through me. Her hand reached for the edge of the table, a reflex of disbelief, and then she crumpled, slow and graceful, as if the air itself had thickened into syrup. Camille screamed. It wasn't the shriek of a woman in shock, it was recognition, a sound that knew before the mind could accept. Michael jumped to his feet, knocking his chair backward. Mom, Camille cried out, but the word didn't fit the tone. It sounded more like why than help. I sat still. Every instinct told me to move, to react, to mirror panic like the others, but I couldn't. Not out of cruelty, out of awe. Because for the first time in years, the chaos wasn't mine to control, it was serving me. The next minutes unfolded like a film slowed to 10% speed. Waiters rushed. The hotel manager appeared from nowhere. The guests murmured, forming their own theories before the paramedics even arrived. Harold Benton pressed a hand to my shoulder. "Richard," he whispered, "say something." I couldn't. Words are dangerous when the truth is louder. The paramedics wheeled Evelyn out under sterile white light. The room smelled of spilt champagne perfume and something metallic guilt, maybe. No one drank after that. No one dared. Camille clung to Michael, shaking, whispering fragments of prayers that broke halfway through each sentence. Michael's face was pale, his body trembling between loyalty and denial. He didn't look at me. He didn't have to. He already knew that I knew. The note in my pocket felt like a heartbeat. "Don't drink tonight." Who had sent it? Who else had known? The police came before midnight. Their questions were efficient, their sympathy rehearsed. An accident, they said, a possible allergic reaction. Toxicology would take time. I signed statements, shook hands, offered condolences. The hotel manager promised discretion. "We handle these matters quietly, Mr. Calloway." That was exactly what I wanted. Quiet. But as I turned to leave, I caught sight of something near the ceiling, a small black dome tucked into the corner above the chandeliers. A camera. The kind hotels install for VIP security coverage, recording everything, every gesture, every exchange. And suddenly time started moving again, too fast. I spent the night in my suite watching the fog roll over the bay. The city below glowed like molten gold, beautiful and indifferent. My reflection in the window looked older than it had that morning. Harold called around 2 a.m. "They'll list it as a medical emergency for now," he said. "No one suspects anything." But cameras don't lie, Richard. Someone will review that footage." I didn't answer. He sighed. "You've spent your life turning numbers into narratives. You can do the same with this. Just be ready." When he hung up, I opened the minibar and poured a drink I didn't intend to finish. The irony wasn't lost on me that I could finally drink safely now that someone else had. Outside, the foghorn moaned across the water like a sermon. I thought about Evelyn, about how she'd smiled at me hours earlier, convinced she was watching me lose control. And in that final instant, maybe she had. Maybe I'd lost something far more dangerous than control. Sleep came in fragments, restless and bright. Dreams of glass breaking. Dreams of Camille's voice calling my name, not with hatred, but something worse, comprehension. Morning arrived too clean for what had happened. Sunlight sliced through the curtains, landing directly on the folded note I'd left on the bedside table. "Don't drink tonight." The ink had bled slightly, as if the paper itself was sweating. I called Harold. He'd already spoken to the detectives. "They're reviewing security tapes today," he said. "I assume that means I'll be getting visitors." "Yes, just stay calm, Richard." Calm. That word again. I had spent a lifetime perfecting it. Calm in negotiations, calm in betrayal, calm in grief. But calm is not innocence, it's armor. And mine was cracking. At noon, 2 detectives came to my suite. They were polite, almost apologetic men used to wealth, careful not to offend it. They asked routine questions, thanked me for my cooperation, and left a card. But one of them paused at the door. "Mr. Calloway," he said, "the hotel's camera caught everything. We'll need your statement once more after we review it." I nodded. He didn't see my hands clenching. He didn't need to. By afternoon, the story had already escaped the walls of the Fairmont. Someone leaked it to the press. Prominent San Francisco philanthropists. Dinner turns tragic. A headline too soft for what it deserved. I turned off my phone. Camille hadn't called. Michael hadn't either. In their silence, I heard the beginning of another story, the kind that grows in whispers before it explodes. At sunset, a hotel staff member delivered an envelope. No return address. Inside was a flash drive and a short note in the same blue ink as before. "Now you'll see what the camera saw." I hesitated only a second before inserting it into my laptop. The video opened with the ballroom's wide shot. There we were, frozen in elegance. Every detail perfect, the linen, the gold, the light. And then it happened. The moment I'd lived now, stripped of emotion, reduced to pixels. I watched myself switch the glasses, subtle, seamless, almost beautiful. The camera caught it all. My breath slowed. Time froze again, just like that night. Except now I wasn't watching Evelyn die, I was watching myself live. The recording ended. No music, no commentary, just silence. And then a second clip loaded automatically. It was from earlier that day, my suite hallway. The anonymous figure sliding the warning note under my door. The face obscured by a hat. But the hand, slender, delicate, and unmistakably feminine. "Camille." The screen went black. For a long moment I couldn't move. The world around me shrank until it was only the glow of the monitor and the whisper of the fog outside. She had warned me. She had planned everything, the poison, the swap, the humiliation, but she hadn't planned her mother's hand to reach first. And now I realized the real revenge wasn't mine. It was hers, and fate had simply chosen the wrong target. That night I poured another glass of champagne, the same brand, the same taste. I watched the bubbles rise and vanish. There's a sound they make if you listen closely, a soft hiss like forgiveness refusing to speak. I raised the glass to the window, to my own reflection. "To endings that never end," I said softly. And for the first time since that night I drank. The taste was bitter, not from poison, from memory. If you followed this far, you know the truth isn't what destroys us. It's the moment we finally see ourselves in it. Press, like if you've ever felt time stop for a single decision and wondered whether you'd survive the silence that followed. The champagne I drank that night didn't kill me. It simply reminded me that I was already someone who lived beyond consequence. Morning came pale and merciless. San Francisco light poured through the curtains like judgment, revealing every crease the night had written on my face. Some men wake from nightmares, others wake inside them. I belonged to the second kind. The funeral was 3 days later. Small, private, tasteful, exactly as Evelyn would have wanted. Lilies again. The same fragrance that had floated through the Fairmont ballroom before her collapse. Life has an impeccable sense of irony. Camille wore black silk and sunglasses large enough to hide behind. Michael looked hollow older. Harold stood beside me, a silent metronome of decency. No one spoke much. The air between us was thick with unsaid verdicts. When the priest closed his Bible, Camille approached me. Her voice was soft, her smile careful. "Thank you for covering the expenses, Richard." I studied her. She looked like someone who'd rehearsed sorrow in front of a mirror. "There's nothing to thank me for," I said. "It's family." The word family felt foreign in my mouth, like glass on the tongue. She hesitated, then added, "I know you must hate me. Hate requires energy," I replied. "And I'm tired." She nodded, pretending to understand, and walked away. But even from behind I could see her trembling. Fear or guilt, I couldn't tell which. Perhaps both. 2 days later I asked Harold to arrange a meeting. "Her and Michael," I said. "At your office, tomorrow morning." He didn't question why. Harold has known me long enough to recognize when a man intends to settle his accounts. The next morning the bay was shrouded in fog thick enough to erase the bridge. Perfect weather for erasing things. They arrived precisely at 10 o'clock. Harold greeted them with his lawyer's smile, kind, meaningless. I sat near the window, hands folded, expression neutral. "Thank you for coming," I said. "I wanted to discuss a small amendment to my estate." Michael looked puzzled. "Dad, I know I interrupted, but circumstances change. People change." Harold opened a folder and removed a single sealed envelope. Mr. Calloway added a codicil to his will this morning, he announced. It concerns the distribution of certain assets should any evidence arise suggesting moral misconduct toward the deceased Mrs. Evelyn Davenport. Camille's head snapped up. "What?" Harold continued smoothly. "It's purely precautionary. Mr. Calloway wanted transparency to avoid misunderstandings." Michael frowned. "This isn't necessary." But Camille was already unraveling. Her fingers tightened around her purse, knuckles white. "Moral misconduct," she whispered. "What are you implying?" I met her eyes. Nothing unless there's something to imply. The room went very still. Even Harold's clock seemed to stop ticking. She laughed, a sharp, broken sound. "You think I—" Her voice faltered. The calm I projected wrapped around her like smoke. "Camille," I said gently, "life is full of accidents. But sometimes accidents have authors." Michael turned toward her, confused. "Camille, what's he talking about?" She stood abruptly. "This is insane." I stayed seated. "Perhaps," I said, "but insanity has never stopped truth from existing." She reached for the door, but Harold spoke first. "Before you leave," he said quietly, "Mr. Calloway asked me to show you something." He pressed a button on his desk. The monitor lit up the same security footage I'd watched days earlier. The ballroom again, the glitter, the guests, the toast, and there in perfect clarity my hand switching the glasses. Then Evelyn's collapse. Michael gasped. "Dad, what is this?" Camille turned to me, pale. "You kept it," she whispered. "Yes," I said, "but look closer." Harold advanced the clip 10 seconds earlier. The angle shifted a glimpse of the hallway before the dinner. A figure in a dark dress placing the warning note under my door. Camille's face unmistakable. Michael's chair scraped the floor. "Camille," her voice trembled. "I didn't mean I just wanted to scare him. I never thought tears spilled sudden and unconvincing. I was trying to protect you, Michael. He was never going to let us inherit anything." I watched her crumble the same way Evelyn had fallen slow and irreversible. Harold switched off the monitor. Silence settled again, thick and holy. Finally, I stood. "Do you know what I envy about your generation, Camille?" I asked. "You believe consequences are negotiable." She wiped her tears, glaring through mascara. "So what now? You'll destroy me." I shook my head. "No, destruction is messy. I prefer clarity." I handed Harold a second envelope. Inside was a notarized letter transferring Michael's inheritance directly to a charitable trust under Camille's name. All her husband's future wealth would fund the very foundation she would never control. "Consider it poetic symmetry," I said. "You built your life on appearances. Now appearances will build yours." Camille stared at me speechless. Michael whispered, "Dad, that's cruel." "Cruelty," I said softly, "is just justice without the applause." She stormed out, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. Michael followed, torn between blood and vows. Harold exhaled, removing his glasses. That was surgical. "I'm done with surgery," I said. "I've moved on to autopsies." That evening I walked alone through Golden Gate Park. The fog rolled over the lawns like a slow tide, erasing footsteps as quickly as they appeared. In the distance, the faint sound of a cello drifted from a street musician. It occurred to me that every family revenge story begins with a toast and ends with silence. Mine had simply followed the script with better lighting. By the time I reached the Conservatory of Flowers, night had folded the city into shadow. I sat on a bench watching the street lamps blink through the mist. For the first time I felt neither triumph nor regret, only stillness. Power doesn't roar, it breathes. And vengeance, once complete, becomes indistinguishable from peace. A week later, Harold informed me that Camille and Michael had left San Francisco. "No forwarding address," he said. "Just an email, something about Europe." "Let them go," I replied. "Will you ever tell them the codicil was fake?" "No." He smiled faintly. "You really are an artist of restraint." I looked out his office window toward the same skyline that had witnessed everything. Restraint, I said, is what separates justice from confession. That night at home, I opened my study drawer. Inside lay the original warning note, the one Camille had written in her own hand. "Don't drink tonight." The paper had yellowed slightly at the edges, but the ink was still vivid. I slipped it between the pages of a leather journal where I kept unfinished letters to my late wife. She used to say revenge was a young man's game. She was wrong. Revenge is for those who've learned patience. Before turning off the light, I wrote one final line beneath her photograph. "Sometimes mercy looks like distance." Then I closed the book. Months later, journalists began revisiting what they called the Fairmont tragedy. Podcasts debated motives, documentaries dramatized theories. Viewers loved it the way they love all family revenge stories, tidy, moral, cinematic. They called me the man who never blinked. They were half right. I still blink. Just not when it matters. You spend your whole life building walls to keep the noise out, And then one day you realize the noise lives inside you. 3 months after the funeral, the city had moved on, but the headlines hadn't. Every few weeks, someone revived the story, the Fairmont tragedy secrets of a socialite's death. Each retelling sounded more theatrical, more curious about me. Mystery sells better than truth. Harold called it media static. He advised me to ignore it. But static has a way of turning into signal when you listen long enough. One morning, while reading the paper in my study, I noticed a letter on my doorstep, hand-delivered, no return address. Inside, Mr. Calloway, I'm producing a long-form series on moral justice and the silence of privilege. I'd like to interview you about the Fairmont incident. Laura Hensley, The Lighthouse Podcast. I knew the name. She'd made her reputation interviewing men who believed themselves untouchable politicians, CEOs, retired generals. Her questions were scalpels, her voice surgical steel wrapped in empathy. I should have ignored her, but curiosity like guilt doesn't age gracefully. Laura arrived the following Friday. Mid-40s, composed eyes, bright with calculation. She didn't come with a camera crew, just a recorder and a leather notebook. Professional restraint, the predator's politeness. "Thank you for seeing me, Mr. Calloway," she said. "Curiosity isn't a crime," I replied. "Yet." We sat in the conservatory sunlight flickering through the glass. My estate overlooked the bay, the same view I'd stared at the morning after Evelyn's death. Laura admired it briefly, then pressed record. "I want to talk about silence," she began. I smiled. "Then you've chosen the right man." She started gently, background, timeline, family legacy, questions I'd rehearsed answers to in my sleep, but gradually her voice shifted tone. Less journalist, more surgeon. "You were seen switching glasses that night," she said. Her phrasing was careful, "Were seen, not you did." The word seen gives people room to lie with dignity. I didn't flinch. "You've seen the footage I asked." She nodded. "An anonymous source sent it to me last month." Harold had warned me about the digital age secrets don't stay buried. They stream. I folded my hands. "And what do you think you saw?" "A man watching a woman die," she said quietly. "Maybe saving himself. Maybe something else." Her honesty disarmed me. I took a slow breath. "You think I poisoned her? I think you didn't stop it," she said. Which in some stories is the same thing. Her words landed like stones dropped into water, small, controlled, rippling outward. It wasn't accusation. It was recognition. We spoke for hours, about morality, consequence, forgiveness. She asked if I felt guilt. I told her guilt was a privilege of the impulsive. She asked if I missed my son. I said missing requires expectation, and I'd retired from those. When she finally stood to leave, she said something unexpected. "There's a difference between justice and control, Mr. Calloway. You may have won one, but you can't keep both." After she left, the silence in the house was heavier. It wasn't peace anymore, it was pause. The stillness before the next sentence in a book I hadn't meant to keep writing. A week later, the first episode aired. She hadn't used my name. Not yet. But anyone familiar with the story could recognize the setting: a retired financier, a private dinner, a tragic accident. Her voice filled the room as I listened through my old stereo system. Some family revenge stories don't end with punishment, they end with applause. And applause like champagne hides what's rotting underneath. She'd used those words perfectly, beautiful, accurate, deadly. Within days, reporters began calling again. Neighbors whispered. Old acquaintances reappeared with condolences shaped like curiosity. It was chaos, elegant, public, uncontrollable. I stayed still. Let the noise crash against the walls and break itself. Outwardly, I was calm. Inside, something colder than fear began to form, recognition of my own reflection in her narrative. Then came the second episode. This time she used my name. Not directly, but enough. An aged patriarch, a hidden note, a mother-in-law's collapse. She even played a faint clip of my voice from our interview, "Revenge is just justice without applause." The world heard it as confession. Within 24 hours, journalists camped at my gate. Headlines multiplied. Social media made myths out of minutes. Some called me a tragic genius, others a monster of manners. Harold called in panic. "You should sue her, for what I asked, the truth." He went quiet. Then softer, "Richard, this isn't about truth anymore. It's about control." He was right, but I no longer wanted control. I wanted silence again, and now it belonged to her. Late that night, a car stopped outside my estate. I watched through the window as a figure approached the gate and slipped something through. No cameras this time, no reporters. Just a woman's hand, calm and deliberate. By the time I reached the door, she was gone. On the step lay a small parcel wrapped in brown paper. Inside, a cassette tape. Handwritten label, Episode 3, unreleased. Curiosity outweighed caution. I played it. Her voice emerged through static. They say every secret keeps its owner, but what if the secret wants to be free? Then a pause. A new voice joined hers, my own, from our conversation, unedited, raw. If Evelyn hadn't died that night, I said someone else would have. The poison was never the problem. The problem was Faith believing family means safety. She'd recorded everything even after I thought the interview had ended, and she hadn't broadcast it yet. That was the warning. A journalist's version of a note under the door. I called Harold the next morning. She's holding the tape, I said. He sighed. She wants something. Everyone does. But Laura didn't want money. She wanted another interview. Not about the past, about what I'd learned. Confession sells, she said when I called her back. Redemption sells longer. I agreed to meet her one last time, not out of fear, out of curiosity to see what truth would look like on someone else's terms. We met at the Fairmont, same hotel, different suite. She set the recorder between us again. Neither of us smiled. Why come back here, she asked. Because some ghosts only appear where they died, I said. She leaned forward. Then tell me, if you could go back to that night, would you change anything? I thought about it. The note, the switch, the scream, the silence after. No, I said finally, because the lesson was never for them. It was for me. Her pen stopped moving. What lesson? That revenge, I said, is just memory with direction. She exhaled slowly, as if she'd expected something colder. Instead, she found something human, and that terrified her more. The episode never aired. A week later, she released a different story altogether about a forgotten murder trial in Nevada. No mention of me, no Fairmont, no champagne. But I knew she hadn't erased me. She'd archived me, stored away like a loaded gun, waiting for a future headline. And maybe that's fair, because the truth doesn't die. It just changes ownership. These days I live quietly. The bay still glows at sunset, but I rarely watch it. The air feels different now, less forgiving. Every so often I hear Laura's voice on the radio. She always ends her episodes with the same line. Every story is a mirror. Look too long and you'll see yourself. She's right, because I can still see myself in every headline, every whisper, every silence. And perhaps that's the final symmetry of all family revenge stories. They end, not when others stop watching, but when you finally start seeing. When a story stops making headlines, people assume it's over. They forget that silence is not an ending. It's just the part where the echoes begin to live inside you. Months had passed since the last call from Laura Hensley. Her podcast had moved on the world's attention, shifting to newer scandals. My name faded from whispers to footnotes. For most men, that would have been a relief. For me, it was the beginning of the haunting. It started with the dreams. Not nightmares exactly, more like reruns of my life spliced together without order. Evelyn collapsing in slow motion, Camille's trembling hands, the note sliding under my door, and somewhere between them my late wife's voice whispering, "Are you proud now?" I would wake before dawn, the same hour the fog creeps in from the bay. The same hour everything feels suspended between forgiveness and punishment. Harold came by, often pretending it was about paperwork. He'd bring pastries I never touched, talk about the market as if the Dow could heal me. One morning he said, "You've won, Richard. You outlasted them all." I smiled politely, but inside I thought no one outlasts themselves. Winter arrived early that year. Rain hammered the glass like persistence given shape. The house felt larger, emptier, a cathedral for regrets. That's when the letter came. Thin envelope, foreign stamp. The handwriting stopped my pulse. Neat, slanted, painfully familiar. It was from Camille, Zurich, Switzerland. Dear Richard, I don't know why I'm writing you. Maybe because they say therapy works better when you confront your ghosts. You're one of mine. I remember everything now, not the night itself, but the moments before it. The laughter, the champagne, the certainty that I was finally in control. I thought I could humiliate you, teach you that power could bleed. Then my mother's hand reached first. I've lived that second 1,000 times. They say the mind edits trauma to protect itself. Mine replays it to punish me. Michael left 2 months ago. He said being near me feels like standing too close to lightning. You were right, revenge doesn't die. It only changes hosts. Tell Harold I forgive him for helping you. Tell yourself whatever you need to sleep. Camille. I must have read it 20 times. Not because I sought forgiveness, I stopped believing in that currency long ago, but because her final sentence didn't feel final. Revenge doesn't die. It only changes hosts. The phrase lingered like static, a pulse of recognition I couldn't quiet. Had she meant it as a warning? A confession or something else, a torch passed to the next hand? That night, I couldn't stay inside. I walked down to the marina, the cold wind slicing through my coat. The bay was black and silver restless. I stared at my reflection rippling in the water and thought maybe this is what guilt looks like, the inability to stay still. I went home near midnight. The house greeted me with silence thick enough to feel alive. As I hung my coat, I noticed something on the floor near the front door. A folded piece of paper slipped under just like before. For a moment my knees nearly gave. The same ivory stationery, the same faint floral scent, and the same handwriting. But this time only 4 words. You forgot one truth. I sat down staring at it for what felt like hours. There was no signature, no hint of who had delivered it. Harold didn't know. Camille was in Switzerland. Laura had moved on. So who? I poured a drink, not champagne, just scotch, and waited for the logic to return. None did. The note glowed under the lamplight like an invitation or a curse. The next morning I found Harold waiting at the gate. He'd heard about Camille's letter. She'd written to him too, but hers was different, shorter. You once told me silence is power. You were wrong. It's debt. He looked shaken. Richard, he said, I think she's unraveling. She's been unraveling since the night of the toast, I said. He nodded. Maybe. But she's taking us with her. He told me that Camille had been speaking to a psychiatrist who specialized in trauma narratives, people obsessed with rewriting their own tragedies. She's reconstructing everything Harold said, every detail. She thinks there was a second note, one you never found. I froze. A second note, he nodded, left by someone else, maybe Evelyn. That afternoon I opened every drawer, every folder, every memory I'd tried to lock away. There was nothing, no second note. Just the same whisper in my head. You forgot one truth. The phrase began to consume me. At night, I heard the champagne glass hit the floor again. At dawn, I saw Evelyn's hand trembling, Camille's eyes widening, my own reflection watching. Not from guilt, from recognition. Because maybe I hadn't just switched the glasses that night. Maybe I'd switched fates. The more I thought about it, the more the memory changed shape. I could no longer trust what I remembered. Did Camille truly poison me, or did I convince myself she had, because it made my actions noble? Memory is the kindest liar. Weeks later, Harold convinced me to see a doctor, not for my health, but my sleep. The prescription didn't help. The pills blurred the line between waking and dreaming. Sometimes I'd wake and find myself sitting at my desk, the Fairmont's old invitation laid out in front of me as if waiting for another name to be written. One night I dreamt of Laura Hensley. She was in the ballroom holding her recorder, surrounded by empty chairs. She said every story begins with a note and ends when someone stops reading. Then she looked at me and asked, "Have you stopped reading yet?" When I woke, the house was silent except for the rain tapping on the windows. On my desk, the old letter from Camille lay open, though I was sure I'd left it sealed. At the bottom in fresh ink, a new line had appeared. You were the beginning. I stopped sleeping altogether. Harold came by one last time, suggesting I leave San Francisco, start somewhere anonymous. But anonymity is just guilt without an audience. Instead, I returned to the Fairmont. The hotel had been renovated, new chandeliers, new staff, no memory of the night that defined me. I asked for the same table in the Venetian room. The waiter hesitated, then nodded politely. When the champagne arrived, I didn't touch it. I just watched the bubbles rise the way time does, beautifully, pointlessly. Across the room, a woman sat alone near the piano. Dark coat hair, pinned familiar posture. For a fleeting moment, I thought it was Camille. Then she turned slightly and I saw it wasn't. But in her hand, she held a folded piece of ivory paper. The air left my lungs. I stood, but before I could cross the room, she was gone. Only the note remained on her empty table. I unfolded it. No words this time, just a single circle drawn in blue ink. Perfect, unbroken. That night I understood. The circle was the truth I'd forgotten. Revenge doesn't end. It loops. It finds new shapes, new storytellers, new hosts. And maybe now it had found me again, not as the avenger, but as the ghost. I keep the circle framed above my desk. A reminder or a prophecy, I'm not sure which. But some nights when the fog presses against the windows and the house hums with the faint sound of memory, I swear I can hear a champagne glass fall somewhere far away. And when it does, I whisper the only prayer I still know: let the next echo be kinder than the last. If you followed this story to its end, you already understand revenge isn't a weapon. It's a mirror. And sometimes what we destroy isn't them, it's the reflection we can't bear to see. Tap, if you've ever heard the sound of your own silence. It was a Tuesday when she appeared just before the sun disappeared behind the bay, the kind of hour where everything looks half real. The doorbell rang once, soft, hesitant. When I opened the door, she stood there, a young woman, maybe 24, her coat damp from the mist, her posture rehearsed somewhere between courage and fear. "Mr. Calloway," she asked. Her voice carried something familiar. "Yes," she hesitated. "My name is Clara Davenport." The air left the room before she even entered. Davenport, Evelyn's family name. She noticed my reaction but didn't step back. "I believe you knew my grandmother." The understatement of the century. "I did," I said. "Come in." She followed me into the study, the room that had become my confessional booth. Her eyes lingered on the shelves, the framed photos, the silence. "I'm sorry to come unannounced," she said. "I was told surprises are a family trait," I replied. That earned a faint smile. She placed a small, leather-bound book on my desk, age-worn edges frayed like it had survived more than one lifetime. "I found this while clearing a storage unit in Paris," she said. "It belonged to my grandmother. It mentions you." The sight of it felt like déjà vu made physical, the way memory sometimes steps out of the mirror. I didn't open it immediately. "Why bring it to me?" "Because I think you deserve to read what she wrote about that night." "That night," I repeated. The words tasted metallic. She nodded. "The Fairmont." For a long moment I just stared at the book. Then slowly I opened it. Her handwriting was elegant, looping, unhurried, the kind of script people practiced when communication still mattered. The first few pages were routine travels, society dinners, charity events. Then halfway through the tone shifted. March 12th. Sometimes I wonder if love and power are the same thing, wearing different perfume. Richard Calloway is the only man who looks at me as though I am not a reflection of his success but its cause. That makes him dangerous. I stopped reading. Clara's eyes searched mine. "You knew her well, didn't you?" I nodded. "Yes, too well and not enough." I turned the page. May 6th. "If Camille ever learns what I've done for her, she will never forgive me. But better she hate me than live poor. Richard's trust is the currency that will build her life. Someday he'll learn that betrayal is simply the other side of devotion." A chill crept across the room. Evelyn hadn't been an innocent. She'd orchestrated her own deceit long before Camille ever poured the champagne. "Do you understand what this means?" Clara asked quietly. "It means I said that none of us started the fire. We just kept it burning." Clara sat across from me, her expression calm but curious. She had Evelyn's eyes sharp, assessing, but none of her mother's cruelty. "My mother used to say you were the reason our family broke," she said. "She said you humiliated her." "I suppose that's true," I admitted, but not in the way she meant. "She also said," Clara continued, "that you killed my grandmother." The room seemed to shrink. I took a breath, slow and steady. "I didn't kill her," I said. "But I didn't stop it either." She studied me, weighing the shape of my words. "You could have stopped it." "Yes. Then why didn't you?" The question was so simple, so unadorned, that it disarmed me more than accusation ever could. "Because in that moment," I said, "justice felt quieter than mercy." Clara nodded slowly, absorbing it like someone reading an unfamiliar language but understanding the emotion behind it. Then she said something I didn't expect. "She wrote about you again, at the end." She flipped to the final page and slid it toward me. June 18th. "If he ever reads this, tell Richard that he was never my enemy. He was my reflection. And reflections, when stared at too long, turn into ghosts." I closed the book. The silence afterward wasn't heavy, it was sacred. We talked for hours after that, about Evelyn, Camille, Michael, and the ways people wound each other while calling it love. She told me she was studying psychology in Geneva. "Maybe that's my way of breaking the pattern," she said. When she stood to leave, she hesitated at the door. "I don't know if you believe in forgiveness," she said, "but I think my grandmother was trying to ask for it from both of us." "Forgiveness is like champagne," I told her. "Everyone wants it, but it's mostly bubbles." She smiled faintly. Still, before walking away, she added, "Maybe you should try uncorking it anyway." When the door closed, the room exhaled. I sat back down, staring at the diary. The circle from the Fairmont flashed in my mind, perfect, endless. Maybe Clara was right. Maybe the only way to break a circle was to open it. A week later, I returned to the Fairmont. It had become a tradition, almost ritual, same table, same order, same untouched glass. The waiter, new and polite, didn't know who I was. He only knew I tipped too much for someone who barely ate. This time I brought the diary. I read it again from start to finish under the soft light of the chandelier. Every word felt like a confession addressed to the wrong century. Halfway through dessert, a shadow fell across my table. It was Clara. "I thought you might come here," she said. I gestured for her to sit. "Family instinct," I said. She looked around, absorbing the grandeur. "So this is where it happened." "Yes, it's beautiful," she said softly, "and terrible." We sat in silence for a while, the kind that carries understanding instead of absence. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a small object, an old fountain pen. I think it was hers, she said. It was with the diary. She placed it on the table between us. Gold nib engraved initials, E.D. The pen gleamed under the chandelier, catching the same light that once shimmered through poisoned champagne. Do you believe objects remember, she asked. I think they remember what we can't bear to, I said. She watched me closely. Then maybe you should write something, she said. Whatever breaks the circle. For the first time in years, I felt something move inside me, not guilt, not pride, something quieter. A shift. Like the moment a storm realizes it's run out of rain. I took the pen, uncapped it, and wrote on the first blank page of the diary. Forgiveness isn't a gift, it's gravity. Eventually everything falls toward it. Clara leaned over to read. That's beautiful, she said. It's true, I replied. Even revenge gets tired eventually. She smiled, the first genuine smile of her generation. And just like that, the weight in the room changed. Not gone, but lighter. A month later, a letter arrived addressed in Clara's handwriting. Inside was a single photograph the Fairmont taken from outside, bathed in morning light. On the back she'd written, It's not where it happened anymore. It's just where it stopped. I pinned it above my desk beside the circle note, 2 symbols, an ending, and the possibility of one. Every evening I sit by the window watching the fog roll in. It no longer feels like punishment, more like accompaniment. I've learned to hear the difference between guilt and memory. One demands, the other teaches. And sometimes when the wind shifts just right, I imagine Evelyn, Camille, and Clara walking together somewhere far beyond consequence, 3 women bound not by tragedy but by release. Maybe that's what forgiveness really is, not forgetting, but walking far enough away from the echo that it finally sounds like someone else's story. Tonight I caught my reflection in the window, older, smaller, but still steady. I raised my glass water, this time not champagne, and said quietly, To endings that learn how to end. The words echoed softly in the empty house, and for the first time I realized I wasn't talking to the dead. I was talking to myself. A few weeks later, I donated the diary to the university library in Geneva where Clara studied. I told them it was part of a research project on moral inheritance. They accepted without question. The curator asked if I wanted my name included as donor. I said no. Stories like mine don't need signatures. They just need silence. As I left the library, Clara met me at the door. Will you visit again? She asked. I think I already have, I said. She hugged me, unexpected, uncalculated. In that moment, I felt something I hadn't in decades' presence. Not peace, not redemption, simply the knowledge that the story could end somewhere other than vengeance. Now when I walk through my house, I no longer hear ghosts. Only echoes, lighter, almost musical. The circle still hangs on the wall, but it no longer frightens me. It reminds me that everything, even revenge, eventually finds its center. So if anyone ever asks me what happened at the Fairmont, I tell them this: it wasn't a tragedy. It was a mirror that finally stopped reflecting. And when I close my eyes, I still hear the soft whisper of Evelyn's diary pages turning, as if the story is finally reading me back. If you've listened all the way to the end, you know now peace isn't the absence of revenge. It's what remains when revenge has run out of purpose. Tap if you believe some stories can finally rest. Time has a strange way of becoming softer when you stop asking it to heal you. It doesn't erase anything, it just makes the edges less sharp. Years passed after my last conversation with Clara Davenport. She went on with her life. I drifted quietly through mine. The fog still came each evening, but it no longer carried ghosts, just memories gently folded like old linen. I was 79 when I decided to leave San Francisco for good. The house had grown too large for one man's silence. Every room was a museum of decisions, every photograph a witness that refused to age. I sold the property, donated the furniture, and packed only what mattered: Evelyn's diary, Clara's photograph, and the circle note, that perfect symbol of what we can never finish, only understand. I moved to Madrid. I'd spent so much of my life hiding from the past that I thought I owed it one last conversation face to face in the place where everything had once begun, Europe, the mirror continent. The first thing I noticed in Madrid was the light. It didn't forgive, but it didn't accuse either. It simply revealed. 2 months after settling in a small apartment near Parque del Retiro, I received a letter. It was written in neat, familiar handwriting, elegant but stronger now, more confident. Dear Richard, it said. I don't know if you still read letters, but I hope you do. I'm giving a lecture next month at the Universidad Complutense de Madrid. The topic, El Círculo del Perdón, the circle of forgiveness. You once said stories should end when they learn how to stop reflecting. I think this one has. If you can come. Sit in the back, don't say a word, just listen. Con cariño, Clara. I smiled as I read it. She had learned the art of understatement, the family's most refined inheritance, and yet beneath her calmness there was light. I marked the date on the calendar, March 12th, exactly 40 years after Evelyn's death. Some circles don't just close, they choose their own anniversaries. The university auditorium smelled faintly of old wood and chalk. Students whispered notebooks, open screens, glowing like fireflies in the half-dark. I sat in the back row, my hat low and visible. Then she entered. Clara Davenport poised serene, dressed in white. The years had shaped her into something rare, a woman who could speak about pain without carrying it. Buenas tardes, she began in Spanish, her voice clear and steady. Today we'll talk about forgiveness, not as an emotion but as an architecture. Her words translated effortlessly in my head. She switched between languages as if weaving two worlds together, English for logic, Spanish for heart. She began with the story. Not names, not places, just emotion. Imagine a family bound by silence, she said. A father who builds his empire with reason. A mother who believes deception is love. A daughter who mistakes revenge for justice. And a man who watches all of it, not as victim, not as villain, but as mirror. Students leaned forward, caught by the tone, not dramatic, but inevitable. In psychology, we call this intergenerational repetition, she continued. But in truth, it's simply fear with good memory. Every generation inherits not the sins of the last, but their unfinished emotions. She paused, glancing briefly toward the back of the room. Her eyes met mine for a single heartbeat. Not recognition, just acknowledgement, the way the ocean acknowledges the sky. This man, she said softly, believed revenge could bring equilibrium. But revenge is arithmetic. It can balance numbers, not souls. It restores fairness, not peace. I closed my eyes for a moment. Hearing my life turned into theory was both humbling and freeing. She had transformed pain into lesson and lesson into legacy. Clara opened the old diary on the podium, Evelyn's. Its pages, yellowed but intact, looked small against the modern world. My grandmother once wrote, she read, "Betrayal is just devotion that forgot its manners." That line haunted my family for decades. But what she didn't know is that devotion and forgiveness are twins. One looks backward, the other forward. When you understand both, the circle closes. The room was silent. Even the students who had come out of curiosity were now still, as if listening to something older than the story itself. A young man raised his hand. "Professor Davenport," he asked, "do you believe forgiveness means excusing evil?" She smiled. "Forgiveness doesn't erase responsibility," she said. "It reclaims identity. When you forgive, you stop being defined by what hurt you. You stop being the echo and become the silence that holds it." Then she added something that pierced me straight through. Forgiveness is not saying it's okay. It's saying I'm no longer willing to drink from that glass. The room exhaled, and for the first time, so did I. She closed the diary and said, "There's one more thing." Her tone softened. Years after the event, the man in this story received a note. No words, just a circle, perfect and endless. He thought it was a warning. In truth, it was a lesson. Because every circle is a doorway, the choice to keep walking or to step out. She lifted her gaze again. In the end, he stepped out. The applause began softly, hesitant at first, then warm, sustained. I didn't join in. My hands stayed folded the same way they had been the night of the toast decades ago. But this time there was no glass. Only gratitude. When the crowd emptied, I stayed behind. Clara walked to the back slowly, her steps unhurried. For a moment we just stood there, teacher and ghost. "You told the story well," I said. She smiled. "It was never mine alone. I didn't think you'd recognize me," I said. "I didn't," she replied softly. "I felt you." We walked together down the marble corridor, sunlight stretching long shadows ahead of us. She asked, "Do you regret any of it?" I thought for a long time. "Regret is for choices we didn't understand," I said. I understood mine too well. She nodded. "Then what keeps you awake now?" "The quiet," I said. "It used to comfort me. Now it listens back." She touched my arm gently. "Then fill it with something better." The next morning, I wrote her a letter, the last one I would ever write. "My dear Clara," it began. "You taught me that forgiveness is not surrender. It's the only rebellion that doesn't repeat the crime. If Evelyn, Camille, and I were pieces of a pattern, then you, child, are the thread that rewove it. I used to believe justice was balance. Now I know it's grace, the courage to live without needing the scales to match. Keep telling our story, not as tragedy, but as testimony. Because some family revenge stories end, not with blood, but with understanding. If one day someone asks who I was, tell them this. He was a man who learned that silence is not peace until it forgives itself. R.C. I sealed the letter, placed it inside Evelyn's diary, and sent both to her in Madrid. Then I walked to the park and watched the fountains rise and fall, perfectly balanced for a moment before surrendering to gravity. A few weeks later, my heart began to slow in ways the doctors called natural. I called it appropriate. Each day became smaller, simpler tea-morning light, the hum of life outside my window. I often thought of Evelyn's final line reflections when stared at too long turn into ghosts. I suppose I had finally stopped staring. On my last evening, I sat by the window overlooking the city. The bells from a nearby church marked the hour, 8 o'clock, the hour of transition. The circle note lay on my desk beside Clara's photograph. I took a pen and drew one small line through the circle, turning it into an open shape. That was enough. When the heart stops, it doesn't shout. It whispers the same thing time always has: now you can rest. Months later, Clara recorded a new lecture. Her students uploaded it online, where it spread quietly, shared, rewatched, remembered. In it, she spoke of legacy. When you forgive, you don't rewrite history, she said. You rewrite inheritance. Because the past is never gone, it just waits for permission to become something else. She paused, smiling softly toward the camera. My grandfather, by choice, not by blood, taught me that every story, no matter how dark, hides a single light. And that light is always the same: understanding. The video ended with one sentence on screen: El perdón no borra la memoria, la ilumina. Forgiveness doesn't erase memory, it illuminates it. And now to you, the one listening. You've followed me through betrayal, silence, justice, and mercy. What began as a toast in a glittering ballroom became a confession across generations. If you remember nothing else, remember this: every act of vengeance begins as a wish to heal. But healing never arrives by hurting others, only by refusing to keep drinking the poison. Whatever your story is, whatever circle you're trapped in, draw a line through it. Turn it into a doorway. Walk through. Thank you for walking this entire path with me, for listening, feeling, and breathing through every chapter. If this story touched something inside you, I'd love to hear what it awakened. Leave a comment below. Your reflections matter more than you know. And if you want to keep exploring stories like this, stories about truth, forgiveness, and the fragile ways families save or destroy each other, please subscribe, tap the, and share this with someone who might need to hear it tonight. Because some stories are not told to entertain, they're told to remind us that it's never too late to end a cycle.